Hello, gardeners, wherever you may be, and welcome to Gabbing About Gardening, broadcast live from CKTZ 89.5 FM, Cortes Radio, on beautiful Cortes Island. I'm your host, Lucretia Shanfarber. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Willow, the all-woman band from Quadra Island, for their beautiful music that we feature throughout our show every week. Oh boy, is it hot. Hot and dry. And while some things in our gardens are loving it, we need to be mindful of what our soil and our plants need in this heat. How best to water and care for our gardens. Well, today on Gabbing About Gardening, we'll gab with Arzeena Hamir, our garden goddess from Vancouver Island, about watering and shading our gardens, and she'll also give us some timely, quick tips on harvesting our garlic, because it is garlic harvesting season, after all. And then we'll gab with Jennifer Banks-Dahl, the homestead mama on Quadra Island, about summer salads from her garden, about making cilantro sauce, about the wisdom of succession planting, and especially about pacing ourselves. We can't do it all the time, especially in this hot weather. We'll also gab with Mike Gall, volunteer firefighter and permaculture activist and educator on Quadra Island. Mike will give us his tips on how to FireSmart our gardens. That's all coming up on today's show. Thanks again for being with us today. And thanks to our main Gabbing About Gardening show sponsors. That's Cortez Market and Speedy Bin Compost Bins. You know, just yesterday, I bought the best fitting and most comfy garden gloves I have ever worn. And no, I did not order them online. I bought them from our local market, Cortez Market on Cortes Island. Cortez Market is a family-owned and operated independent market that has a wide range of garden supplies, including organic seeds. They have all the seeds you need to plant your winter veggies, carrots, beets, cabbages, broccoli, kale. They have soil amendments and organic fertilizers too, and garden gloves. I think I mentioned that, the best garden gloves. So support local businesses. Shop at Cortez Market. Check out cortezmarket.com. And thank you also to Speedy Bin Composters on Vancouver Island. Joyce and her family have been making Speedy Bin composters since the 1980s. And just last weekend, I harvested my third batch of Speedy Bin compost, and it is gorgeous stuff. Black, crumbly, perfect for top dressing and mulching and making compost tea. Speedy Bins are rat-proof, mice-proof, raccoon-proof. They last forever, and they're easy to use. Check out speedybin.com. Joyce will be so happy to help you select the best model for your composting needs. Speaking of needs, whenever I have a question about gardening, I check in with this lady, Arzeena Hamir. Arzeena is an agronomist and professional market gardener on Vancouver Island. She's also an educator and is dedicated to helping gardeners learn to grow better. Let's Ask Arzeena is a regular segment on Gabbing About Gardening, and we've reached Arzeena at her family farm on Vancouver Island. Hi, Arzeena.
Hello, how are you?
Wonderful. Welcome back to Gabbing About Gardening.
Well, thank you. Thanks. We survived that heat wave, so
we did.
We're doing well. Yeah.
We did, and there may be more coming. So I guess it's really timely for you to tell us what are the best times to water, and how do we keep water in the soil in this high heat weather?
Yeah. So, a lot has to do with what you were just talking about, ensuring that your soil has really good organic matter, because that's really what holds the water in the soil. But in terms of times for watering, the big thing that you want to stay away from is to be watering in the middle of the day. Primarily because, for two reasons. The soil is so hot, and any water that you put on, the majority of it is just going to evaporate away, and it's not going to help the plants. Secondly, on a hot day, the water drops from, if you're overhead watering, when they hit the leaves and fruit, they can act as a bit of a magnifying glass and can actually burn certain plants. So, the best time to water is actually early in the morning when the soil has cooled down. And none of your water that you're applying is evaporating right away. So if you can get up really early, because, in the summertime, the sun is up, before 6 a.m., that's the best time to water. But second best would be in the evening then, when everything's cooled down back again, and you can apply that water and again know that the majority of it is going to stay in the soil and not evaporate.
And what about when we see squash and kale just wilting before our very eyes? Is there anything we can or should do, or do we just hold on until it's either early morning or early evening?
If something's wilting, it's an emergency, then I would go and water it and just try and really be careful not to hit the leaves. So use like hand watering. Try not to use an overhead sprinkler or anything like that, but just really target the plant. Now, squash and that family is usually quite hardy and is able to withstand drought quite a lot. So if you see it wilting, that is often a sign that something is going on wrong. Wilting happens early when you first transplant squash. So I see it like in May when, it starts to get warm and your squash plants are quite young and the roots haven't really gone down deep. So if you are seeing wilting now at this time of the year, something has happened to the root system, that it's not, been able to go down deeply. So this may just indicate that, you look at that soil in the spot, because squash shouldn't really be doing that even in the heat of a heat wave. It's fairly robust, and so the wilting squash is an indicator of something else happening. Either there's something munching on the roots of the squash. Wireworm can do that when they're young, or there's something impeding the roots from going down deeply. And whether that's, if there's rocks in the way, or if you've got a hard pan, or your soil just isn't allowing the roots to go deeply. So that's something that you may want to take care of before next season.
Okay, good to know. So do keep lots of organic matter in and on the soil. Do not water in the middle of the day. Do water early morning and the evenings, and target the soil. Keep the water off the leaves in the high heat of day. And what about mulching? What are your recommendations for that?
So important. The thing is, I pull away my mulch in the springtime because I find it does really benefit slugs and wood bugs, which we had so much of this spring. But at this time of the year, it is essential for plants. In order to trap the moisture in, like with the sun beating down, when it hits mulch, often most mulches are light colored, or they're something like compost. The mulch itself will absorb the heat and evaporate water, but the soil below is generally protected. It's almost like the mulch acts as a Band-Aid or a sunscreen. So this is the importance of mulch, is really protecting your soil from the hot UV rays of the sun.
I like that imagery, that mulch is like a sunscreen.
Yeah.
So what can we be using for mulch? You mentioned compost can be used as mulch. What else should we use?
You can use pretty much any material that you have quantity of. So if you have access to a lot of compost, like you said, if you've got lots of Speedy bin composters, putting a layer 1 or 2 inches on the top of the soil, fantastic. Otherwise, if you've got grass clippings, I know people are really hesitant to use grass clippings, and I often, laugh because most grass, if it's been mowed fairly often, does not have any seed heads. So don't worry about it, starting to create grass. It's just the grass clippings will turn yellow quite quickly, but they work as quite an excellent mulch on the ground. We have a lot of chipped trimmings because we have so many blueberries and currant bushes. So we use that as a mulch around our garden quite extensively. But if you've got even things like shredded paper, if you're desperate, I would put down shredded paper. Newspaper acts as a fantastic mulch, as does cardboard. Because, if you pre-water the soil and then put those items on top, again, they protect that moisture, prevent it from evaporating, and act as that lovely barrier. And then lastly, you can use plastic as a mulch. There are weed barriers and plastic mulch, plastic-based mulch products. And, we use them on the farm. We have a woven weed barrier that we use around our long-standing plants like kales and cabbages and squash that we reuse every year. So, if you don't have access to a lot of natural ingredients, you can purchase mulches as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So the core message is keep it covered and use whatever you have. Now, do you use shade cloths when we're in this high heat?
I don't, and I probably should. I was very surprised to see our tomatoes bounce back from that heat dome quite well. So they were small enough that our roll-up sides on our greenhouses worked really well. But we don't use them. We don't use shade cloth on the rest of the garden. We have 4 acres in production. We just can't shade cloth everything. But as you know, Lou, because we were in communication, I did lose a very substantial amount of our black currant crop this year. And if this is going to continue, where we have summers like this with some very high heat, I may need to look at installing a shade cloth over that crop in particular.
Yeah,
because it seems very susceptible. It's that English. It likes the temperate, cooler climate. It's not used to these types of temperatures for sure.
Well, my condolences on your loss. It really does feel like a family member as you watch these plants go down. It hurts. It's hard to handle. Well, thank you for all of these fabulous tips and Let's Ask Arzeena on Facebook is becoming really popular. So as these questions pop up, it's so wonderful to be able to come to you as a professional and get your advice. Do you have time for talking about garlic?
Sure.
Good. We're entering garlic harvest and curing season, and there's a lot of contradictory information. Let's ask Arzeena. What does Arzeena say?
Okay, so here is what we do. We grow mostly hardneck garlics, and the first thing you do with a hardneck is you break off the scapes when they've curled once. But we often leave 1 or 2 scapes in the patch per variety, because what happens with scapes is that they curl, but then they uncurl and they stand straight up. And when they do that, that garlic is ready to go. So that's a really easy indicator. Now, if you've already broken off all your scapes, don't worry. There's still other ways that you can look at the plant. We look to see the bottom 4 leaves to be fully brown and dry. So, if that minimum, so it's about 1/3 of the plant has started to brown, that is a good indicator that garlic is ready to be pulled. Now, if you wait longer than that, it's not that something super bad is going to happen. What can happen is that the bulb continues to grow and can sometimes burst its wrapper leaves. And when it does that, it's still delicious and fully edible and totally fine, but it won't keep well. So burst wrappers, those garlics you can use for seed or for eating, but you probably they won't last much past October. So keeping that fully enclosed bulb is what your role is right now, and not letting your garlic stay in the ground too much longer than what those indicators is what will help prevent a lot of that burst wrapper. So if the bottom 4 to 5 leaves are nice and brown, you can start pulling.
Okay, and I love the tip on leaving one scape, and when it stands back straight up, that
It's
is
like,
your
ta-da!
indication.
It's announcing.
Love that. I never had heard that before. That's a great one. Unfortunately, all of our scapes have been taken, and I did pull a few. And here's the thing, Arzeena, they're not clearly differentiated. You know, I don't really see each clove. The bulbs are big and beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks to you. I got my garlic seed from you last year and I love it. So should I feel concerned that I don't see a lot of clove differentiation and distinction at this point?
Not at this point. I mean, often the bulbs are just too plump and juicy for you to see the clove. Sometimes, you know, the bulb looks more round than it does bumpy. Now, having said that, if you know, after drying down, you find that you only have one single clove, that can be sometimes an indicator that the garlic may have gone in a bit too late if it was spring planted. You know, in order to differentiate, garlic needs to have been exposed to some very cold temperatures. And normally we have no problem, you know, reaching those temperatures. But in really mild years, it can happen that the garlic doesn't get that signal to differentiate. That's generally what causes like a single clove. The only other way I've known a single clove to happen is if you start your garlic from the bulbils, like from the scape, you know, producing those little seed garlic-y looking things at the top of the plant. When those are planted, they only form a single bulb in their first year. So, yeah. I can look up and see what else has happened. Maybe I can talk to you about what else.
Well, I'm hopeful. I think, you know, I'm just that expectant mother syndrome of, are my baby garlics doing okay? And I'm sure they are. They always have before. Now, tell us about curing and drying. What do we do once we pull the garlic out of the ground gently?
Yeah. As we found out last year, because it was such a wet year, curing and drying is extremely important. You don't want to lose all that garlic that you just spent 10 months growing. So what we do is we bundle them in about 5 or 6. We tie them together and then we hang them up to dry. We have a barn that specifically we use to do that. If you have something like a clothesline or even nails on a wall that you can hang these bundles of garlic from, if you are able to get airflow around the entire bulb, that is what you're trying to do, is to dry the moisture, because garlic is quite wet and juicy when you pull it out of the ground. I don't know if you've noticed, if you've ever eaten like a fresh garlic.
Oh yeah,
it's
absolutely
amazing. Yeah, there's the papers between the garlic cloves are still rubbery, and it's actually quite easy to peel. But that rubberiness is just because of the moisture level. And you need to get rid of that as quickly as possible. So we hang it up, but the big thing is to put it out of the sun. Don't let it sit in the sun, otherwise the garlic can actually cook, as we know now. Some plants can in high temperatures. So out of the sun in a shady spot where there's really good airflow around the bulb. If that means hanging it on a nail or hanging bunches over on string, whatever you can do to enable that to happen.
Okay, and just to clarify, when you say hanging, you're talking about hanging by the leaves and the bulb is hanging down, right?
Yeah, so we don't trim the leaves off at the moment. I find that having the leaves there helps the plant lose the moisture more quickly. If you cut them, I mean, it's still possible to work with cut garlic, but like the leaves, as you mentioned, enable you, it's much easier to hang them by bundling the leaves with some kind of string or twine and then hanging them. If they're cut, then you probably would need to use something like an onion bag and put them in onion bags and hang those bags somewhere.
Okay, but ideally leave the leaves intact, hang them by the leaves, the bulb is hanging down. Are you leaving all of those beautiful long roots intact until they dry?
You know, we do. I find like the process of trimming the roots and taking off the leaves and peeling off the dirt and the skin to be quite a fun activity. We actually, you know, have groups of folks come and we have like a little bit of a tea party. It's just a very relaxing Zen kind of thing. So
I want to come to that party. Your Arzeena's garlic hanging party. Yes. Okay.
Anytime. And, people who come to clean the garlic go home with all the splits and all of the garlic that we can't sell. So let me know.
I will, my dear.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long are we hanging the garlic for, and then what?
You are hanging the garlic for probably a good month. That's what we find. It takes a minimum 3 to 4 weeks for the moisture to really leave the plant. And the weight of garlic when it's wet is quite substantially heavier than when it's dry. Like there's quite a difference. So you'll know the leaves will fully go brown after about 3 to 4 weeks. So those are the indicators. But obviously, if you need garlic, you can eat it before it's been cured. Don't be buying supermarket garlic in between. The curing is just what's allowing you to then store that garlic through the winter. Getting rid of the moisture so that it doesn't rot while it's in storage.
Okay. I'm all pumped up about my garlic. I'm feeling confident again. Yay. Thank you, Arzeena. I just really enjoy talking to you. I always go away feeling like I'm a much better gardener than I probably am. And that's a good sign.
Come on.
Thanks again. We'll gab soon. I'm hoping you'll come on a regular basis, and we've got a spot for you for Let's Ask Arzeena. Thank you, Arzeena.
You're so welcome. Thanks, Lou.
Arzeena Hamir. You can learn more about Arzeena and her family farm at amarafarm.ca. Coming up next, we'll gab with the Homestead Mama. That's Jennifer Banks-Dahl, about what's growing in her garden and what she's making in her kitchen. Jen will also give us much-needed tips on pacing ourselves in the garden. So just relax for a minute and enjoy the lovely music of Willow, the folk roots band from Quadra Island. Stay with us. We will be right back. You are listening to Gabbing About Gardening on CKTZ Cortez Radio 89.5 FM. Hello and welcome back to Gabbing About Gardening. I'm your host, Lucretia Schanfarber. I always look forward to gabbing with Jennifer Banks-Dahl, the Homestead Mama from Quadra Island. We've reached Jen at her family farm, Foot Forward Forest Farm. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Lou.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Today I'm actually in Campbell River because we're picking up our next round of baby chicks for our meat birds. So
Wow, you are always, I might hear chicks cheeping in the background.
Well, right now we're just doing errands, so you might hear a few city sounds, which is unusual for my life, but
yes.
Today is the day. So.
Well, you are always so busy, Jen. I mean, I guess that's the life of the homestead mama. How do you pace yourself? That's one of our topics today. Are you able to do it?
Well, it's something I'm always asking other people how they do it because, it is pretty difficult. So I wanted to tell you a story starting out about my daughter. Last night, my daughter, Gabrielle, she's 12. She said, 5 more years, Mom. And I said, 5 more years till what? 5 more years till I can move out and get an apartment in Campbell River. And she's like, oh, Mom, I really love animals, but I'm just getting tired of taking care of them. It's so much work. And it's true, and that was a really good reminder to me that farming and homesteading is so much work, but you really need to make sure you take the time to enjoy life as well. If not for yourself, for the children in your life or other people who would really like to have a break once in a while in the summer when it's so busy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, out of the mouth of babes, it sounds like. I can really relate to what Gabby has to say. Are you going to take it to heart?
Yes, well, I am trying. I really am trying. This year, my goal with my garden was to become more efficient. So doing irrigation, not planting all the things, but really deciding what are the things that we really love and want to eat and what are the things I can just let go. And then the other thing that we're doing that I always try to do, but getting better every year, is succession planting so that everything isn't ready all at once and then you're just totally overwhelmed in the kitchen trying to deal with it all. So things like brassicas and beans and peas, succession planting them so that you can enjoy them throughout the summer and not have to process them all at once.
Let's just clarify what succession planting actually is, Jen. Can you tell us what that means?
Well, for example, if you plant all of your cauliflower at once, it's all going to be ready at the same time. And so you're going to have to either process it or eat it, and then you're done. Whereas if you plant cauliflower every few weeks, so for us, we start from seed. So start it from seed maybe every 4 weeks. Then it'll be ready every 4 weeks, and you'll have fresh cauliflower throughout the summer and not have to put it in the freezer all at once. And the same with broccoli. Beans, we succession plant, I think, every 2 weeks. And you can plant beans up to really the end of July so that you're eating fresh beans throughout the summer and they're not filling your fridge with all these beans that you need to deal with. So another thing that we do is I try to do peas and then beans. So, for example, I'm eating so many peas right now. I'd rather enjoy the peas and wait to eat beans a little bit later in the summer. So I don't actually have any beans yet because I waited to plant them. So if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. Now, are you keeping a diary or something?
Yes, I do. I have this thing I call a 5-year journal, although I hope it'll be even longer. But I have a big binder full of loose leaf, and so every day is a page. And so every year I go back to that day, like today would be July 6th, go back to that day in my binder and write in what I did in terms of my garden, what I'm planting, and then we also track the animals so that I can go back years or I can go back days or weeks and see when I did something. Because I try to mark it on the label, but often my labels, they disappear or they fade in the sun. So it's not the most reliable way to track things for me.
Well, I admire anybody who does that. I attempt it every few years, and it lasts for a couple of months, and then it just sort of falls by the wayside. But you're reminding me of something that Adam Schick said, Adam Schick from Linnea Farm here on Cortes Island. And he really stresses keeping records. He keeps quite meticulous records. He takes a notebook out in the field with him. But he recently said, plant what you can manage, not what you can manage to plant. And it sounds like your succession planting is really falling into that realm of advice.
Yes. No, I really love that thing as well. That's really good wisdom.
So what's growing and what are you doing? Tell us about your summer salads and your cilantro sauce. You've tempted us with all these yummy things.
Yeah, well, summer salads. So, it was funny. I was just thinking about lettuce. So I don't really plant very much lettuce anymore. The first year we had this garden, which we had turned a grass yard into a garden. And the first year, my lettuce grew amazingly well. The second year, my lettuce got totally taken out by wireworm, which is what happens when you put a garden on top of grass. The wireworm lives in turf, and it just will invade your garden, especially in the second year. The third year, I planted lettuce in containers, which controlled for the wireworm, but then all my lettuce turned bitter. And lettuce isn't all that nutritious for you. So now I've learned this amazing trick, which is to make salads out of things that self-seed. So I have this oric growing in my garden that is this gorgeous hot pink color. And it all started when I got a few little bits of it from someone else's garden, just little babies. I planted it in my garden, and I've never had to plant it again. And it just self-seeds. It comes up everywhere. I'm constantly giving it away to other people so they can have it in their garden. And it's really nutritious. It's kind of like spinach. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a thicker green.
Mm-hmm. I love orac.
You can eat it all summer long, and you don't even have to plant it. So I use a lot of that in salads, and we use a lot of lamb's quarters in salads, and then kale. And one way I like to use kale in the salad is to make what I call a garden slaw. So I can't eat cabbage. There's probably other people out there who can't eat cabbage either, at least raw. So I can't eat it raw. I just can't digest it. But I make our variation of a coleslaw with shredded beet, shredded carrot, maybe some peas or beans, just raw chopped up, and then some shredded kale.
Yummy.
And so it keeps a really long time. And one of the dressings I like to make with it is with the cilantro sauce that you mentioned.
And how do you make that?
So cilantro is something you also need to succession plant because it goes to seed fairly quickly. But on the Quadra Island Garden Club.com website, Karen Dunn recently posted a blog with her recipe for cilantro sauce. And it is just amazing. So you can use it as a base for salad dressing. You can use it on toast with your egg. You can put it in various recipes where you'd like a little bit of cilantro. It's just an incredible thing. And we freeze it and use it year long. So
wonderful. And I just saw a posting from Romina Jones, who's going to be on the show next week, how she uses cilantro to keep pests away. She actually uses it as a bit of a chop and drop between her rows of brassicas that are really susceptible to the cabbage moths. And I'd never heard of that. So it's QuadraIslandGardenClub.com to get the recipe for a cilantro sauce. That sounds yummy, Jen.
It is amazing, and it's one of the blogs I think it may even be the most recent blog that we posted on there.
Well, we will check it out. We will put a link on our Facebook page, our Gabbing About Gardening Facebook page as well. Thanks for taking the time out of your trip to pick up those chicks and give us these lovely tips, Jen. We'll talk with you again soon.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye, Jen. That was Jennifer Banks-Dahl. She's the homestead mama and a regular contributor to Gabbing About Gardening. We're going to take a short break, a musical interlude featuring Willow, my favorite band from Quadra Island. Check them out on Facebook at Willow Music Band. You're listening to Gabbing About Gardening on CKTZ 89.5 FM, Cortez Radio. Hang in there with us. We're coming right back to gab with Mike Gall, volunteer firefighter and permaculture educator. Mike is going to give us his tips on how to FireSmart our gardens and our homes. Stay with us.
Down upon his knee, said, son, you go to school and learn your letters. Don't you be no dusty miner boy like me. Well, I was born and raised at the mouth of the hazard holler. Coal cars roaring and a rumble past my door. Now they stand in a row, all rust and empty, and the other end don't stop here anymore. I used to think my daddy was a black man, had script enough to buy the company store. Now he goes to town with empty pockets, and his face is white as a February snow. Well, I was born and raised at the mouth of the hazard holler. Coal cars roaring and a rumble past my door. Now they stand in a row, all rust and empty, and the other end don't stop here anymore. I never thought I'd learn to love the coal dust. Never thought I'd love to hear those tipples roar. But God, if only grass could turn to my name, them greenbacks fill my pockets once more. Well, I was born and raised at the mouth of the hazard holler. Coal cars roaring and a rumble past my door. Now they stand.
Hello, gardeners, and welcome back to Gabbing About Gardening. We are experiencing unprecedented heat waves and wildfires all around the world. What can you do? What can we do as gardeners to reduce the risks? Mike Gall is always the guy I call when I need those kinds of tips. Mike is a FireSmart advocate and educator, and he is a certified permaculture designer. We've reached Mike at his home on Quadra Island. Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us on Gabbing About Gardening.
Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, Lou.
Oh, the feeling's mutual. So FireSmart and permaculture, how do those two things complement each other?
Well, first of all, they're two of my favorite topics. Permaculture is a design system. Most people who are listening to the show probably are somewhat familiar with it. It's a design system that breaks your property into zones, and then you do different functions for them. Every good permaculture design has elements of fire-smarting the property at the same time. And it also uses zones to help you create a effective and safe design for your property. So they're very interlinked. And most of the key designers in the early stages came from Bill Mawson, which I believe is properties located in Madagascar, and then Jeff Lawton, he's located in Australia. Well, they have to pay very strict attention to fire smarting their properties because the fire dangers are so high there because of the heat and dry conditions that they experience.
Yeah, and we're sort of falling into that pattern as well, aren't we, in the last few years?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, last year was rather exceptionally moist year. That was good. Here in the month of June, we actually have had, on Quadra anyways, half of the typical rainfall. And, of course, it's been extraordinarily hot and extraordinarily dry. So conditions are pretty ripe this year for the potential of having a fire. And so we have to take extra special measures, I think, to make sure that we all stay safe.
Tell us some of your tips and things that you're recommending that we do in our gardens and around our homes, Mike.
Well, from a garden perspective, I mean, first of all, I'm only going to speak specifically about what we call the 1.5 meter zone, which is an area exactly 1.5 meters around the house itself, and then the 10 meter zone. And you know, every time I go to different people's properties to help them out with a FireSmart evaluation, you know, we get the classics with, you know, firewood all piled up against the house because it's convenient, or that there's vegetation that's right up against the house, and in particular, the types of vegetation. And so the most important thing I can recommend for anybody is if in that 1.5 meter zone, they eliminate any type of coniferous plant and or you know anything that would have what I would call a thick, smelly resin, and that it has loose, papery or flaky bark, and leaves accumulations of needles or any of the dead material that falls off of the plant through the process of the year. Those are the types of plants you absolutely don't want in the 1.5 meter zone next to your home. And in particular, even all the way out to 10 meters, but there are ways of getting around that. And then the other things that you want to look for, so those plants, let's just clear that up, would be things like cedars, ornamental cedars and junipers, any type of small pines like a mogul pine, and any tall grasses or spruce. Get them away from the house, 10 meters away minimum. And then plants that you can put next to your home or close to your home would be the type that are deciduous and have moist, supple leaves. They have a minimal accumulation of dead vegetation and a water-like sap that produces very little odor. Those are the types of plants. So those would be things like poplar, birch, aspen, cottonwood, maple, alder, ash, cherry, and some other ornamentals.
Mm-hmm. So where does sword fern fall into all of this, Mike?
That would be one that's kind of okay. The problem with sword ferns is that they often have accumulations around the base, and if those get cleaned up, then they're not too bad.
Okay, good. We've got a lot of sword fern at our place.
Yes,
I absolutely,
you do.
I love it. I couldn't chop it down, but keep it cleaned up at the bottom. So the deciduous trees are great. Be careful of the evergreens. Keep everything back from the house. What is your personal thought on mulching in the garden pathways and in the beds using composted wood chips?
Well, okay, so up until just last year, we had an ongoing battle around the house that we would have these wood chips next to it. This year I won. So we moved back all of the wood chips that we use as a mulch. Wood chips a little bit further out where they retain moisture or inside a shade line, those tend to be a little bit better. You have to use them in order to suppress the plants that you don't necessarily want. But, you know, right up against the house is an absolute no-no. You've got to come up with a better solution. There are recommendations within the FireSmart manual for doing certain things. The one technique that I've really started to get excited about, as you know, is sprinkler protection systems and keeping the area in that 10-meter zone around your house as green as possible and as high humidity as possible. And they don't have to be elaborate. They can run off of your domestic water system if you have enough water, that is, I guess. Or you have to add other things into your system, like some sort of water retention tanks or what have you, in order to give yourself a really good shot at protecting your property should a fire event be coming your way.
So which sprinkler protection system are you recommending? And are people able to connect with you directly to help them get that set up?
Yeah, there are a number of different rooftop sprinkler systems that you can buy. They're not, like I said, they're not expensive. I use a system called WASP, which is WASP. And they are gutter mount. They don't have to be on the house until such time as they're needed, and they just clip very quickly on the end of a broom handle up onto the gutters of the house. And if you don't have gutters on your house, as many homes here do not, there are mounting clips that come with the kits. And you put them up so that they're strategic, soaking the entire roof area. And the other big advantage of that is that the water runs down the roof line, fills gutters with moisture, and prevents the gutters being part of the problem. In addition to that, though, if you're trying to do a proper sprinkler protection system, you need to add some outside sprinklers, 3 or 4 sprinklers, perhaps even moving them around, and just building up that humidity bubble that's all around your house, because that's one of the key ways of stopping and suppressing any of the embers that might float in from several kilometers away from a particular fire front.
Well, not everybody has a lot of water in their well. A lot of areas on our islands, Mike, are concerned. People are concerned about their water. What do you say to people who don't feel like they have enough water to keep a sprinkler system going?
Well, let's face it, that during the winter months, there's plenty of water. And it's a matter of collecting water. And there's a number of different ways that you can gather enough water to run a sprinkler system for many, many hours. One of the simplest is a water storage tank system, or even an above-ground pool. A 10-foot or 12-foot across, 4-foot high above-ground pool will actually hold 4,000 gallons of water, or maybe even more. And if your sprinkler systems are efficient, that would last many hours worth of suppression. There's a number of different water tank systems that are available, commercial grade ones, but something that one of the groups I'm involved in here on the island is selling is called IBS tanks. Those are international bulk system tanks, and they carry 250 gallons of water with a wire cage on the outside, and they're stackable. And you can create a very potent reservoir of water with those units, and filled up with rainwater during the wet winter months. Okay,
and is it okay for people to track you down and get some more information? How would we do that?
Well, I'll give you my email address. I think that's probably the easiest, and just email me if you have questions about that at mickeeg@gmail.com.
Mickey@gmail.com. And I will post that on our Facebook page as well. Before we wrap things up, though, Mike, I know you're a pond designer. I've seen your ponds and ponds that you've designed. Just tell us a few words about how ponds factor into our fire smarting our gardens and landscapes.
Well, the conditions, I'll keep it as short as I can. The conditions for ponds on your property, they have to be right. You can create very simple ponds with much higher capacity than the above-ground pool that I was describing, that are lined and that they would store tens of thousands of gallons of water, which is the ideal scenario. And there's so many benefits to the pond systems in terms of irrigating your gardens, irrigating your property, enhancing the property from all different aspects, and attracting wildlife and so on. It's just they're just a delight to have. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree. We love our pond, and we really enjoy all of those aspects. So the message is keep it green, keep it moist and humid, choose deciduous trees, move back those coniferous trees, those evergreens, the cedar, the juniper, the pine, all that tall grass, and make your garden and your home FireSmart. Is that pretty much the message for today?
It's a simple message, isn't it?
Thank you, Mike. It is. Thank you so much for sharing it from your perspective. We'll talk with you again.
Once again, Lou, thank you very much for having me, and anytime.
Thanks, Mike. I've been gabbing with Mike Gall, FireSmart advisor and permaculture designer on Quadra Island. That's our show for this week. Please join us on Gabbing About Gardening Facebook page and on Instagram. Gabbing About Gardening also has a YouTube channel featuring garden teachers gabbing about all kinds of gardening topics. And do go to cortezradio.ca to hear all of our gabbing podcasts. Thank you again to all of our great guests, to our show sponsors, Cortez Market and Speedy Compost Bins. Much gratitude to Willow for their beautiful music. Huge thank you to Aidan Mahone for producing today's show with his amazing calm in the face of all kinds of uncertainty. And as always, thank you to you, our listeners. You are the reason we are gabbing about gardening. Thanks for tuning in. Here's Willow singing Mini Wichoni, Life is Water. I'm Lucretia Shanfarber. This is CKTZ 89.5 FM Cortez Radio. Now get outside and get dirty.
All my relations come, every nation come, all my relations under the sun, we are one, we are praying come, we are praying come, we are the song and we are the drum, we are one, we are the river come.